you for joining us today. This is the fifth lecture of the 2021 series. Our speaker is Frank Tortorich.
You want to hand
He
these
is
out?
considered by many as an authority on the history of the Carson River Route of the California Trail, which is the topic we will be speaking on today. Frank is a native of Jackson Valley and has been a student and researcher of the California Trail for the past 40 years. He has published books which include Gold Rush Trail, a guide to the Carson River Route of the Emigrant Trail, Hiking the Gold Rush Trail, and his newest book, John A. Snowshoe Thompson, we've all heard of, Pioneer Mail Carrier of the Sierra, which was 10 years in the making. It was the subject of one of his prior lectures. Hopefully we can convince him to give that lecture again in our next series next year. But for now, let me please introduce Frank Tortorich.
Thank you. Go ahead, Marianne. I came down with laryngitis this morning, and I had no voice at all this morning. So
it was wonderful.
So I'm going to struggle through this, Paul, so please be patient. I'm going to have Marianne do a lot of reading for me because it just won't come through very well. So let me give you a little background. As the introduction said, and some of you already know, my main passion has been the Carson River Route, Highway 88 Carson Pass. And during my research, of course, it expands and expands and expands. And Marianne and I have been researching for well over 40 years. There was a friend of mine, his name was Earl Schmidt, and Earl was a great guy. He was a clamper, which we won't hold that against him. And he had a home up in Murphy's. And Earl fell in love with the Big Tree Road. And then he wrote this little book called The Big Tree Carson Valley Emigrant Road, a major branch of the California Trail. Well, a number of us kept saying, and he said it was opened in 1849. And so we were saying, well, Earl, we have never read any documentation where the Big Tree Road was opened in 1849. So where are your sources? And he kept saying, Francis Bishop, who is a well-known authority. And we kept saying, well, Earl, show us the documentation. Show us where Francis Bishop said it was open in 1849. And he never produced it. But he still talked about it and all that. So a friend of mine said, Frank, you need, because the Big Tree Carson Valley Wagon Road is a branch of the Carson River Route. My friend Don Buck said, Frank, you need to do research on the Big Tree Road. And so my goal was to support Earl's research. Forgot his name. I wanted to so much support Earl because he was just a great guy. So that was my goal, is to do the research, and the more and more and more I got into it, the more and more I couldn't support Earl's work because the documents just weren't there. And I finally was able to get into the Francis Bishop papers. And by this time, her collection had been separated between the Calaveras County Archives and Big Tree State Park. And so I got a hold of the state park and I told them what I was doing. And they said, well, we have the papers, but they haven't been accessioned yet. And I said, that doesn't make any difference to me. I don't care whether they're accessioned. I just need to get into them and see if I could do it. And so after going through, all the supervisors, I finally got permission to get into the Francis Bishop papers. And I think I found out where Earl went astray. Francis did a lot of really good research, and you'll find her name all through Calaveras County documents and stuff for years. And she did a series of interviews. And she interviewed this one young girl whose great-grandfather came to California in 1849. And he opened a blacksmith shop in Vallecito. She jumped to the conclusion that because he was in Vallecito, he must have used the Big Tree Route. That's not what it, but so she said to Francis Bishop, my great-grandfather came over the Big Tree Route in 1849 and settled in Vallecito. Francis did not comment on that at all. She just said, this is what this young lady said, along with all the other interviews. Earl took that one phrase and ran with it, in my opinion. Well, I took that person's name, her great-grandfather, and I started doing some research on him, and I found him. And he settled in Ione, California, which meant he came over the Carson River Route in 1848, and then he moved to Vallecito and opened a blacksmith shop. The problem was solved. So I'm going to tell Earl what I found, and along with other stuff. And you know what that son of a gun did? He died on me. Is that inconsiderate? That is really inconsiderate. And so I never had an opportunity to share what my research with poor old Earl.
Do you have it documented?
I do. I do. There have been other things written on it about the Big Tree Road. This is a nice booklet here. I don't know if you've ever seen it, written by Coke Wood, and you may be familiar with that. The Big Tree, and notice all of these comments the tree is singular. It's not the Big Trees Road, it's the Big Tree Road, because they were always referencing that one big tree that they cut down and put a dance floor on and a pavilion on. That was the big tree. And they didn't comment about all the rest of them. The big tree. Okay. And then he goes on to talk about Abbott's Pass and Harvey Blood, who established a toll road on this. This is a nicely well-done document. And then in 2004, and I don't have extra copies of this, I wrote an article on the Big Tree Road that was published in the Overland Journal. And this is the scholarly paper, the magazine for our Trails Association, the Oregon-California Trails Association. And I'm proud to say that we got Writers of the Year award for that article. And so it was a great piece of research. And one of the documents that popped up, and it's kind of fragile, I ran across this in a bookstore, a book sale. You know how they have those, they used to have a lot of them. And one vendor had this annual report of the Surveyor General of 1856. And that date caught my eye. And so I started going through it, and here is the documentation for when and how the big tree, Carson Valley Wagon Road, was established. Seneca Marlette. Yeah. Okay. And so now we'll get into my presentation, and I'm going to let Mary Ann do that. And I'll interject from time to time. Yes?
Before you go on, I am still confused. Carson Valley, Carson Pass, Big Trees, which is on Highway 4.
Right.
Carson Pass is Highway, what is it?
88.
Carson Valley is where?
Is where Carson Valley is where Genoa, Woodford's, you go past Woodford's into Genoa, that's Carson Valley.
Okay.
You with me?
95, isn't it?
Yeah, 395.
On the other side.
Yeah, and then if you go over to Carson City, you drop down into Eagle Valley.
So today when you're speaking of Carson Pass, is that correct?
I'm going to be talking about, no, we're not going to talk about, we're going to be talking about the Big Tree Road.
And that's what became Highway 4.
4.
Okay.
All right? You with us? Okay. That's a good question. I'm glad you asked that to clear it up.
For maps, and so if
Huh?
something isn't clear, I have to get
All right.
in my maps. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
If you have any questions, just raise your hand and he'll,
I brought my tea and honey to soothe my throat.
okay. The Big Tree Road is different from some of the other trails that we studied for two basic reasons. First, it is not a major immigrant trail, and it was not used until 1856. Second, it was built as a road, was not a trail that later became a road, as many of the other trails we study became. Merchants in the southern mines in Stockton financed this endeavor to bring gold seekers from the southern mine to the southern mines and increase their economic base. In the spring of 1855, the California legislature passed a bill that, quote, provided for a survey and construction of a wagon road from the Sacramento Valley to the eastern boundary of California.
Let me stop you. What they're talking about here is a commercial wagon road to connect Nevada. Now, we already had the Carson River Route. We had the Truckee River Route, which is Highway 80, and we had the Johnson Route, which is Highway 50. Those were already open as wagon trails. But the legislature is looking to have this as an interstate. and it was going to be a 16-foot wide built wagon road. So when we talk about roads, we're talking about something that's built rather than a trail is where they just followed through. Okay.
On July 26, 1855, California State Surveyor General Seneca, thank you, Hunt Marlette received a letter from Calaveras County requesting support for the state to survey a route beyond the Calaveras Big Trees. Marlette responded by saying there was not enough money to survey that route, and they would have to take the initiative themselves. The town of Murphys raised $500, and on August 8, 1855, sent out O.B. Powers to survey and explore for the Big Tree Route. Murphys took its name from the members of the 1844 Stevens Party, who were the first to cross the Sierra with wagons.
And that would be the Donner Route, Truckee River Route.
By O.B. Powers to Marlette, November 25th, 1855. Our party, consisting of Dr. N.C. Conglin, A.H. Hall, J. Thornton, L.W. Noyes, J.S.
Nicewinder. Winder. You guys don't have easy names.
and H. Capron, came together with a Mexican named Lemon for packing. They left the town of Murphy's at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and 8th of August.
On the 8th of August.
Doesn't say that.
On 8th of August.
No.
The is missing.
They spent the night near the site he referred to as the world-renowned Big Tree. He goes on to describe his journey up the mountains. We entered a very large...
Let me stop here. Before this next sentence, Powers was traveling up what they called the used road. Now remember, this is 1855. Mining was going on. Timbering was really important. So there was a logging road that ran from Murphy's all the way up before you get to Bear Valley. And so what he's saying here, we came to the end of the used road. Okay.
We entered a very large valley, which from the sign of bears which we discovered, we called Grizzly Bear Valley, unquote. Here we are northwest from Murphy's, about 40 miles, 31 of which is good traveled wagon road, and the remainder will require but little to make it as good a road as any in the state. Powers described his journey dropping into a valley they named Pacific Valley, continuing into the McCullummy Valley, now called Hermit Valley. Again, he quotes, "Leaving the McCullummy Valley, we start down the branch in a northwest direction. Winding around, we reach the summit in about a mile. We cross a small ridge into Indian Valley, some 4 miles from McCullummy Valley. Indian Valley is very large, being some 10 miles long and 4 miles wide."
Powers got it wrong in estimating his distances. I've traced this exact route that they did, and with my co-author of the article. And we were able, the terrain was so good, we were able to say, this had to be the way they went. And so you go into Indian Valley, and they probably went in about mid-valley, but it's nowhere near that long. Okay.
Here we found Indian tracks in abundance. We came upon 10 or 12 squaws dressed in rabbit skins. Upon seeing us, they started up and fled, but we headed them off upon giving them that we meant no harm. We were approaching some rocks when some 15 or 20 Indians, armed with bows, came out apparently ready for battle. Expecting a combat, we prepared for it, when much to our surprise, one of them cried out, "How do you do?"
Wouldn't that bring you up short?
We found them to be very friendly, and many of them speaking tolerable English, or rather Pike County lingo.
Now, these are Washoe Indians, okay, and they did inhabit Indian Valley as well as other places. Where did they learn English? Remember, this is 1855. They occupied all that area around Dayton and Gold Canyon, where gold was discovered in 1849. And they learned to speak English from those miners that came into that area. Okay.
From Indian Valley, we went north, passing through a piece of thick timber and between twin lakes. Tamarack Lake is really a dammed lake when at low water reveals itself as two lakes. We entered a small valley which we called Charity Valley and passing out at the head. We reached which might have been termed the pass, being the highest point on the whole route. Here it's obvious the group was not taking altitude measurements, and they missed the fact that between Twin Lakes and Charity Valley, they were at what's today called Border Ruffian Flat, which is 8,315 feet in elevation. This is the divide between the Carson River drainage and the McCollum River drainage. The pass Power refers to as 7,834 feet in elevation and separates Charity and Faith valleys.
When we were doing our research, they mentioned Twin Lakes. We couldn't find Twin Lakes. We looked, and we knew it couldn't have been where Blue Lakes is, two lakes there, and there is another Twin Lakes, but it wasn't anywhere near the route. And this took several years, but one October, Jim Carman and my co-author were driving out the road towards Indian Valley, and we went by Tamarack Lake. The water was really, really low, and guess what we saw? Two lakes. And it all fell into place and fit because they went between the two lakes. And we traced that, and everything fit perfectly.
Powers continues. This point, his highest point, is about 4 miles from Indian Valley, and the road rises gradually the whole distance. The timber is almost the only obstacle in the way of it being now a good wagon road. The descent eastward is nearly or quite as easy as the western slope, neither one forming any obstacle to the passage of loaded wagons. About a mile east of the pass, rising from the side of a smooth, round mountain, is a mass of conglomerate rock 200 feet high in height, having the appearance of a monument in which in honor of our country we called Calaveras Monument, not the name on the modern quads. It is an unmistakable landmark, standing entirely alone with no other conglomerate rock within 3 miles. After leaving the pass, which is about 10 miles north from the divide between the the Stanislaus and the McCollum rivers, we came into Faith Valley. From the report submitted by Judge Freeman, taking from L.W. Noy's notes, from this, the main or summit pass, the traveler descends about 100 feet and enters the westerly end of the valley or meadow about 5 miles long, to which the party gave the name Faith Valley. They traversed this valley about a mile, and leaving it upon the left or north side, descended a hill with an easy grade, perhaps 200 in perpendicular measurement, and struck the head of Hope Valley, and 2 miles distant from the Carson Road.
All right, a little background. In 1848, the Carson Route was opened from west to east by discharged members of the Mormon Battalion. There were 45 men, 1 woman, 17 wagons, 2 brass cannons, and 300 animals. And they were exploring a different way to get over the Sierra. They did not want to go over the Truckee River Route. They knew about it, and they knew it was difficult. So they're following Indian trails. And they worked their way up over the Indian trails and dropped down into this large valley on the east side. And the journalist Bigler wrote, "We are now on the east side, and we have hope that we're going to make it," meaning all the way to the Salt Lake Valley. They named that Hope Valley. This group is coming along. They knew Hope Valley was in existence, so they added faith and charity, taking the scripture from Corinthians 13 of hope, faith, and charity. So they are the ones that put together after Hope Valley, and that's why they're named that today.
Should I infer that your reference to the Calaveras Monument, 200-foot high conglomerate peak, is that what you have marked here as Jeff Davis Peak?
Yes, that thank you. Yeah, it is called, it is now called Jeff Davis Peak, but there's a big movement to get that name changed for the same reasons they want to take down all the other monuments and stuff. Yeah, because it was, at that time, there were a lot of Southern sympathizers in California. And so Jeff Davis was a hero to some of them. And that still is, as far as I know, is still the name of the peak. Okay?
That is true. He's also a former ranger at Calaveras Big Tree, so you can keep the name if you want, in my opinion.
I'm not going to go one way or the other. But thank you for bringing that up.
Also, that faith, hope, and charity only appears in the St. James Version. All the others are faith, hope, and love.
Oh,
Referring back and continuing with Power's report, after leaving the pass, which is 10 miles north from the divide between Stanislaus and the McCullamy Rivers, we come into Faith Valley. This is the most beautiful, about 1 mile wide and 5 in length, lying near east and west. Faith Valley runs north and south. The west end curving a little to the south, very level and better stocked with grass and clover than any other place we saw. It runs through a branch of the Carson River, branches of which are found in Indian and Charity valleys. Power is confused here as the branch out of Charity Valley drains into Hot Springs Creek, which does eventually empty into the East Fork of Carson. Indian Valley, however, drains into the McCullamy Hill.
River.
Thank you. Coming into the west end of the valley, we followed it down about a mile, and we passed over a small ridge into Hope Valley. Through it runs another branch of the Carson River emptying down the canyon. This is the West Fork of the Carson River, whose headquarters are the
Headwaters. That's a topographical error.
whose headquarters are the upper end
You want to try that once more?
This is the West Fork of the Carson River, whose headwaters are the upper end of Faith and Red Lake Basin. In the middle of the, he continues, in the middle of the south end of Hope Valley is a hill which can be passed with good road on either side. And at the north end of the hill we struck the old Carson and Hangtown Road, along which are scattered fragments of wagons, carcasses and skeletons of horses, mules, oxen, etc. Hope Valley is about 10 miles long, 3 miles wide, and is plentifully supplied with grass and water. Powers is off on some of his directions and most of his distances. but what they did show was a viable wagon road was possible by generally following their exploring route. Just who were the first immigrants to use the Big Tree Road is not clear, but we do have some indication. Sherman Day was a California legislator who served as chairman of the Committee of Internal Improvement. It was this committee who had the
Oh, see?
It was
Far
this
be it from me to change her papers.
committee who had the responsibility of the Wagon Road surveys. On September 20th, 1855, they submitted a report to the Surveyor General Marlette. Dear Sir, at your request, I have examined at different times during the past 3 months several routes across the Sierra Nevada with a view to the construction and improvement of an immigrant wagon road under the act passed by the last legislature. These routes were examined merely by walking or riding over them or near them, but without a regular survey and without the use of instruments, except in a few cases to obtain the bearings of prominent points or to determine the grade of some of the more difficult places. For the next few pages, Day goes on to describe all the existing routes and their potential improvement. He continues, just previous to my last trip on the old California route,
Carson.
Carson Route, an exploring party from Calaveras County in the vicinity of Murphy's had passed through Hope Valley and Carson Canyon to explore a route between Carson Valley and Murphy's. As I did not meet them, I had no means of knowing definitely where they had examined except from casual information attained from immigrant parties. It is a mystery to these immigrants who these immigrants were and where they were going or coming from. Frances Bishop, a Calaveras researcher, states in her papers this was the first record of immigrants using Calaveras Route. It is more likely these immigrants were on the Carson Route or coming from the Carson Route. Day continues. I made, however, a short excursion up the upper and southernmost head of Hope Valley, some 5 or 6 miles above the Carson Road, where the Carson Road joins it, and on my return I have learned that this forms part of their route. We crossed the summit between the head of Hope Valley fork of the Carson River and a tributary of the McCollum. The ascent on the north side is not difficult or excessively steep or rocky. A wagon might ascend it in its natural state. The elevation was apparently as great as the western summit of the old Carson Route. I believe Day was describing Border Ruffian Flat, which is 8,315 feet elevation, and West Pass is 9,540 feet in elevation. He continues, further south over a low ridge, we discern the 2 lakes mentioned in their report, and the route appeared not to be rough, but as a distance, the canyon of the McCollum River seemed to be deep and rugged. Not knowing the precise route they had passed over, and having no sufficient party for the purpose, I returned. Frances Bishop seemed to think this report documented the first immigrants to pass over the route. I think it's too vague to determine or make that conclusion. However, there is a report on a group claiming to be the first immigrant party to use the Big Tree Route, but not until after the Big Tree Road was built. Stockton businessmen subscribed $5,000 to open the new road and divert it into Hope Valley. The road work took place in the summer of 1856. On August 16th, the Calaveras Chronicle was able to report heavy work having been completed, including 8 bridges, the largest being 75 feet long and 14 feet wide. A San Jose resident, Dr. J.W. Reynolds, wrote a letter to the San Jose paper of his 1856 trip to California. According to Francis Bishop, Reynolds came to California in 1850 by another route and had returned east to bring his family out. There's another letter dated September 1856. Mr. Editor, when I last wrote you, I was in Fort Laramie. Our company, known as the Border Ruffian Train. This is the first time I read of a basis for the name Border Ruffian. Consisting of 22 men, 7 ladies, several children, left Westport on 10th of May and reached the town of Murphy's on the 26th of August. In Carson Valley, we found plenty of trading posts. Here, we were met by friends who conducted us through the new pass over the Sierra Nevada mountains. Ours had the honor of being the first train to cross this route. In a follow-up letter dated February 26, 1857, he stated, "Our train consisted of 4 ox wagons, 1 mule wagon, 2 carriages with mules. The constructed road did not go through Indian Valley as the exploring party went. The built road was such a good road that there was a push to make it a route for the Trans-Sierra Railroad. The San Andreas Independent writes numerous articles in 1857 on the Big Tree Road Convention, and the results of their meetings, of which are prompting the importance of this route. A letter from Murphy's to the editor of San Andreas Independent, April 2, 1857 states, "The maps of the route prepared by L.W. Noyes of this place show conclusively that a rail route is possible, as it was chiefly to his efforts that we are indebted to his efforts for making of the exploring party of 1855, and the pass, Border Ruffian, was discovered by him in advance of all the rest. While engaged on this road, he found a new cutoff by which the necessity of passing through Indian Valley was
Obviated.
The Big Tree Road over Border Ruffian Pass had its share of traffic up to 1859, when the Comstock lode was discovered in Virginia. It has Nevada here, but actually at the time it was Utah. Gold and silver mines were being discovered all along the east side of the Sierra. A more direct route to these mines was necessary. A route going due east out of Hermit Valley over Ebbets Pass was open, so travel over Border Ruffian Route was beginning to wane. Starting in 1859, the Carson Valley Wagon Road, Carson Pass Route, was the Amador Carson?
Yeah, you missed Amador.
Oh, sorry. Starting in 1859, the Carson Valley
Amador.
Valley Carson Wagon Road, Carson Pass Route was to be improved, eliminating the steepness of the Red Lake grade to climb to Carson Pass. The Carson Spur was blasted in eliminating the circuitous route over 9,540-foot high West Pass. Silver City was just east over the mountains from Hermit Valley. Business people in Stockton and Murphy raised necessary funds to build the road over the Sierra at what would be named Ebbets Pass. The Ebbets Pass Road was the reason for the Big Tree Route segment from Hermit Valley by way of Blue Lakes, Border Ruffian Pass, and Hope Valley to be used less and less and eventually abandoned.
Didn't you do a good job? I don't think I could have got through that. Anyway, it was so much fun to do the research and hopefully figured out exactly how this came about and who did it. Anybody have any questions?
Not a question, but tomorrow she's going to have laryngitis.
Yeah.
The route that they went through Border Ruffian Pass up to Hope Valley,
Uh-huh.
is that a Jeep trail now, or what is?
It's a bladed road. You could drive your sedan over it. You take off in Hope Valley on the Blue Lakes Road and drive all the way up to Blue Lakes, and you go over Border Ruffian. No, you can drive a regular vehicle all the way to Blue Lakes, but to get from there to Hermit Valley, you really need a Super Duty four-wheel drive. It's a very rugged road.
But it is open?
It is open, yeah. If you have a big Jeep or something, you can do it. I've walked it about 5 times. It's about 7 miles through there.
Is the county or the state responsible for keeping the road open?
Say that again?
Is the state or the county responsible for keeping the road open so somebody could drive over it?
What road are you talking about?
The one you just told me.
Oh, the Blue Lakes Road?
A four-wheel drive.
Oh, well, the road from Hope Valley to Blue Lakes is a county road. That's Alpine County.
Oh,
And then from there on, it's Forest Service. And the Forest Service does not maintain it. They just allow it to happen. And it's a very unique road because on both sides of that road is wilderness area. They call it the cherry stem. And you won't find that in very many places where a vehicle can go through the wilderness. But there's like a 150-foot buffer on each side. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
That's about right, but it's also, Forest Service uses some OHV, state OHV funds to
Yeah,
signage, but there really isn't any maintenance of it.
but nobody maintains it.
There are portions of this now, the Pacific Coast Trail.
Pacific Crest Trail or Pacific Coast?
No, correct.
Crest, okay. No. Let me think.
There are signs up around Hermit Valley that say Pacific Crest.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about it. The Pacific Crest Trail crosses the Blue Lakes Road, where that Tamarack Lake turnoff is, right in there it crosses. And then it goes just east of Tamarack Lake and continues on through, I think it's called Grass Lake, Sunset Lake, and that way, and then up over to Ebbets. Now, at the Ebbets Pass, it does cross at Ebbets Pass. Yeah.
We have a gal here that just finished the PCT, the entire one, the entire trail.
All right, good for you.
All the way.
And one hill?
Yeah, last in 2021.
4.5 months.
4 months.
Good for you. When did you go?
Started in April and ended in
Did you have trouble going through the John Muir Trail with the snow?
No, because it was a drought year, and so
Oh,
it
yeah.
wasn't bad at all. A lot of people sent home their ice axes and even their spikes, because we just had snow over the top of passes, but the rest of the way it was pretty clear. So
The John Muir Trail is the crowning jewel of the PCT.
it's gorgeous. It's definitely the best part.
Yeah.
Did you have trouble from the forest fire, smoke?
No, we got out of California right before. But we were done here
You,
lava fire started, and
Oh.
it got smoky for a while, but we got out fast. We were in a hurry. We knew what was going to happen.
congratulations. That's what is it, 2,600 miles?
Yeah, it's 2,650.
Yeah,
It's called girl power.
yeah. But it's amazing how many gals have done it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was the Carson Pass Ranger for many years, and I loved talking to all of them, and they had some really interesting stories to tell. Yes.
There was a Jeep trail out of Alpine that went down towards Murphy's, and there was a place where they called Slide Rock. We drove that one time, and I was wondering if that's was anything to do with this.
If there's lots of segments of the old Wagon Road still in existence today. When you, trying to think now, when you're going up, Lake Alpine wasn't there, and so the original road went right through the lake. It was called Silver Valley. Yeah, you may run across that, and Mosquito Lake, the same thing. It was, it went through there. But there is a segment before Lake Alpine that it was marked on the edge of the highway where you can walk over to Lake Alpine following that Emigrant Road. There's another section that goes from there up to Cape Horn. Yeah, Cape Horn. And then there were kind of two routes. One was below Cape Horn, and the other one was up around over it. And that's a beautiful segment of road up in there where there's rock masonry, little and little tiny bridges going across the gullies. And then there's another beautiful segment that goes after you leave Pacific Summit and start dropping down. There's a segment that cuts right straight down across the switchback, and then it'll drop down and cross the river before you get to Hermit Valley. And then from Hermit Valley, it follows the Jeep Road almost all the way, but there are some really nice sections of the old Wagon Road that are not the Jeep Road. And then from there, it goes to Blue Lakes, and then there's a nice little segment just kind of to the south before you get to the Tamarack Road there, and then it goes over to the other side of the road, and there's a beautiful segment that goes up over towards Border Ruffian, and in that meadow. The actual Wagon Road, Border Ruffian, the modern road comes through, but Border Ruffian, where the wagons went through, would be to the west of that. And there's a little saddle there, and you can just a gorgeous little swale that goes down, and then it parallels all the way down to Charity Valley. And then another segment goes from Charity over to Faith, and another beautiful segment from Faith over to Hope Valley with some bridge abutments that you can still see. So there's still a lot of it that's walkable.
Was Bear Valley established as a station first, and then he turned it into like a toll road right there, that Floods Toll
Well,
Road?
it was named by the O.B. Powers group.
Yeah.
When they went over the ridge, they said, we will name this Grizzly Bear Valley. It probably didn't come into popularity until 1864 or something, after Ebbets was opened, and Harvey Blood established a toll station there. Harvey Blood got the contract to maintain the road, to actually build some of it and maintain it. And there was no state funds or anything to support it. So to recoup his cost, he was allowed to get a permit and have a toll road.
If you had been a young man or a farmer in the 1840s in, say, Pennsylvania, do you think you would have come west either as a scout or as a wagon train?
Me personally, you bet your boots I would have.
For gold, would you, or before that even?
Oh, that's a hard question. I probably would have been some kind of a scout or investigator or something, Yeah, I've always had that desire to. I've done hundreds of miles of backpacking, and I always wanted to know what's on the other side, right? You always know, I got to keep going because what's over there?
Just more.
Yeah.
The other side of the mountain.
Yeah.
Although there was
Wow.
a lot of farmers and other people who ventured to Oregon because they got free land in the Willamette Valley.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
you haven't asked the question, how did we discover all these segments of road?
Yeah.
And it's a good question. Well, as early as 1856, slips my mind, help me out here. Who was the forerunner to BLM that did the surveys?
Besides the U.S. Geological Survey, I don't know.
It'll come to me in a minute. But they were doing surveys, and we got those old survey maps of the 1870s, and the section numbers are the same then as they are now, but the scale is a whole lot different. So we took all of those old maps, and the BLM office has an incredible collection of them. And we got all those quad maps from there, and then I transferred that data over on, this was before GPS, over onto the modern quads, and then we went looking. And what they did, those surveyors in that time, they were surveying the section lines. So when this old road was across the section line, they'd mark it. And then when they came around on the south end of that section line, if they ran across it again, they marked it, then they just assumed where it went in between. Okay, so those were great anchor points to go out and find those. And by using proportions and a little math, and we were able to actually go out and find those. Now, with the GPS, it's a lot easier.
Did you do that walking?
Yes, walking.
At those elevations?
That's where I lived. That's where I spent my summers.
It's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I didn't have good sense.
I can't breathe. I can't.
Kit Carson came through on the Carson Pass. He was one of the ones that established that route. Did he survey it too, or not?
Okay. Kit Carson, I love Kit Carson as a historic figure. Kit Carson had nothing to do with discovering Carson Pass, other than he was with John C. Fremont on their 1843-44 exploration. And he was a good friend of Fremont. Kit Carson met John Fremont on a riverboat when Fremont got his first contract of 1842-43 to survey the existing wagon road from Independence, Missouri to the Continental Divide, South Pass. And Kit Carson had been a mountain man, so he knew the area. So they met on a riverboat, and Fremont hired him as his guide. Okay, now, that was such a successful survey, and Congress wanted it. And of course, that was a period of time of manifest destiny. You know, it's God's will that we own this continent from ocean to ocean. And many people in Congress were looking for that information. So Fremont provided a lot of that information. It was so popular that he got a contract for the 43-44 expedition with some influence from Congress, because Fremont's father-in-law was Thomas Hart Benton, the most powerful senator in the nation at that time. So here's his father-in-law, who is an expansionist, helping John get these contracts. So, you know, all these kind of connections are really fascinating. So his survey was to continue from the South Pass through the Salt Lake all the way to Oregon. He hired Thomas Broken Hand Fitzpatrick as his guide for that expedition, and on the way he picked up Kit Carson and employed him as an Indian fighter and hunter. Okay, they get to Oregon and they completed it, and they had orders, if you have enough resources and time, go find the Buenaventura. This was a mythical river, or this was a river that everybody thought existed from Salt Lake or the Rocky Mountains and terminated in the San Francisco Bay.
Oh my goodness.
And it showed up on maps actually that way. And if that was navigable, what would that mean to the western expansion, like the Columbia River or something? But I'm convinced Kit Carson knew it didn't exist, because in 1829, Kit Carson, as a young man, came to California with Ewing Young on a trapping expedition, and they trapped all the way up the foothills of the Sierra, all the way up maybe as far as Redding, came down the Coast Range, and then exited the same way. He knew there was no Buenaventura. He saw the mountains. He saw the Sacramento River, the Stanislaus, the Tuolumne, you know, on up. So he knew it wasn't there. But are you going to tell Congress it's not there if they're willing to give you the funds? Heck no. Okay, so they get to Oregon and they decide to come down the east side of the Sierra. They went down probably as far as Bridgeport, and it's winter. It's December of 1843, and they're looking for a way to get over the mountains, because they knew they were approximately on the same latitude as Sutter's Fort. Gosh, I didn't expect to do this talk. I'm not even prepared for it. Okay, so they knew they were on the same latitude because they had sextants and they were doing astronomical measurements. But they didn't know how to get across the mountains. So they came back up after their U-turn down around Bridgeport, came back up, and somewhere around Markleyville. Now, some say he was at Grover Hot Springs, but Fremont, who journaled meticulously, never mentioned Hot Springs. And I think if they saw it, he would have mentioned it. They engaged an Indian, and they asked the Indian, who probably was Washoe, how do we get across the mountains? And the Indian pointed to what now we call Carson Pass. And so Fremont is not talking to him, but Carson and Fitzpatrick are, because they could speak the International Indian Sign Language. So they're asking the Indian, how do we get across the mountains? And he says, that way. So Fremont says, tell him he's going to guide us in the morning. Now, there's snow everywhere, and it's winter, and maybe 30 feet of snow on the ground. So and the Indians saying, no, rock upon rock, snow upon snow, white man, die. Well, you're going to guide us in the morning. So in the morning when they got up, guess who's gone? That Indian's out of there. So they made their attempts, and they did make their way up to the Carson Pass area. One afternoon, Fremont climbed on top of a peak, which I believe is Red Lake Peak, and he looked north, and he saw a great body of water that appeared to have no outlet. It's the first white recording of sighting of Lake Tahoe. On another afternoon, Carson climbed on another peak to the south of the pass, which I think is Elephant Back, and he looked west and he said, I see it, the little mountain. And he saw Mount Diablo because he knew what it looked like from his 1829 expedition. And from up there on a clear day, it jumps right out at you. You can see it. So they came over through that pass, starving to death, eating their dogs, eating their mules, and went down and finally got to Sutter's Fort and exited that way out. Carson was along as the Indian fighter. Okay, so how did Carson Pass get its name? In 1852, Kit Carson did come back to California with a group of men and 6,500 head of sheep that he bought in New Mexico for 50 cents a head, and he's going to sell it to the gold rushers for $5.50 a head. 6,500 head. That's a piece of change. And I speculate, can't prove it, this I call a Frankism, that at Carson Pass there was a tree. On it it said, Kit Carson, 1844. So if Carson did carve his name on it, I say he did it in 52, but dated it 44, because that's where they were in 44. But there's no way he carved his name on that in 44, because there's 30 feet of snow, and is he going to say, hang on, everybody, I know you're starving to death, and I know you're cold, but I'm going to dig down to ground level and carve my name on this tree.
You said that was December of 44, though, right?
Well, by this time, when they crossed, it was clear into February, by the time they crossed the mountain. Yeah. So did Carson carve his name on that tree? Maybe, or maybe somebody else did. We don't know. But I believe it was from that carving that pass became known as Kit Carson Pass. But it was not discovered, or Carson can't take any credit for it. How'd I do?
To avoid the Sierras, why did not everyone come across the southern route through the desert, but do that in the winter, for example, and come up through Southern California?
Well, they did, and in fact,
All these wagon trains that came over the Sierra, why did not they all go the southern route?
too far. It wasn't a direct route. They're
It all
impatient.
began, I mean, that trail began still at,
I don't know. I don't know. I can speculate, is all I can do is speculate. You know, here they are. Okay, let me explore this. Let me explore this logically, if you will. All wagon trains before they were wagon trail, all wagon trails before they were wagon trails were Indian trails. Okay? All Indian trails before they were Indian trails were game trails. The game followed the river routes. The Indians followed the game along the river routes.
yeah.
Those became the routes because you needed the water for the wagons to support the animals. So you had to follow the wagon routes. The southern trails didn't offer the water. Okay, that would be my best guess.
Okay, answer my question.
I didn't hear it.
Border ruffian.
Oh, Border Ruffian. Border Ruffian, that group came out of Missouri. And if you remember oh gosh, you go back to I'm trying to think of it. But anyway, there was a big rift between Kansas and Missouri in those days over the borders. And there was a group of ruffians that got together and fought those wars, and they were called the Border Ruffians. And that group when they came out of Missouri, Independence, Missouri, called their train the Border Ruffians. That's the only connection. It's not documented, but that's my best guess. Yes?
So I've been doing some family research, and in the early 1850s, I had a group of family that came into Stockton, and it does say the name of the wagon captain and some of the family members, but I don't know anything else about it. Can you steer me in the right direction to find who was in that whole wagon train that came? And they came from Missouri. They came from what I can tell.
So you have a journal, you have the name, you have the dates? Yes or no?
Let me look real quick. I took a picture.
Pardon me?
Before I came here later.
Yeah, let me talk to you later,
Okay.
okay?
I know it's a little off subject. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. It's a good question. But we do have sources through our Trails Association.
That's what I want.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what I was looking for.
yeah, that we might be able to find it.
I
Yeah.
have a quick question. Is there a comprehensive map of the actual trail because we'd like to hike it, the old route? What sources would I use for GPS
Oh,
or do you have it in your books?
Do you have it in the article?
I have it in here, but it's not, I don't think it's detailed enough. I do have it on quads, and who else has it on quads is the ranger station.
Oh, really?
Yeah, up by, what's the one up on, up, huh?
Avery, there's one up in Bear Valley.
What's the first one up the hill?
Halfway.
Yeah, up there, that ranger station should have a full set of them. An archaeologist by the name of Dave Davis worked with me on that. Did you know Dave Davis? Anyway, and he had a collection of those quads, so they should have them in there for you. Okay?
Say goodbye, Frank.
Any others? Anyway, thank you all.
Your voice.
I'll tell you, when I woke up this morning, I thought, I can't do this.